Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you all for coming. I'm not Steve Crowther, by the way. My name is Fred McGlade and I'm the regional organiser for the northwest of England. Steve is much older than I. Just want to make that point. Well, you're all sort of sat out in the wings there. Come in. Can you not come in and join us in the centre here? Can you all just come and join us? Join the main crowd.
Come on, join us.
There's too many hanging about the bar. That's what I do for a living. No, it's not. No, it's not true. It's not true. It's not true. Whatever they say about it. Nigel is doing an interview just outside at the moment for BBC Radio Lancashire. And as you've seen, the cameras are here for the BBC. And they're just going to do 5 minutes outside filming. And then the cameras will come in here. So be on your best behaviour and I'll smile nicely because you might be on the telly. There's no money involved in this. There's no money in TV anymore. Jonathan Ross has got it all. We're not getting any. But thank you all for coming. It's great to see so many people here in Oswaldtwistle. Is that right? Aussie. All right then, Aussie. I'll go for it. Aussie then. I can't say it. I'm Northern Irish. What? There's no hope for us, is there? But no, Aussie then. I'll call it Aussie because obviously my phraseology is pretty poor on that one. But it's nice to be out here. You know, this is, for me, this is part of the heartland of England. And you people are the people most affected by the disgraceful government that we have at the moment and by the idiots we had before that. So I'm pleased to see so many of you coming out wanting to hear what we have to say as a party, and I hope you will all have a very enjoyable evening with us, and please feel free at the end of it to ask questions because we're an open party and we're not frightened to say it as it is. And isn't it about time that the British people, us, started saying it as it is for a change, started sticking up for ourselves, British jobs for British workers? Well, we mean it. That's the difference. We mean it. You'll notice on the chairs there's leaflets. Please take as many of those as you wish. And you'll see our manifesto there. Take it home. It's some bedside reading. It's not Mills and Boons, but it'll do. And there is an application form for those of you who are not members to join the party this evening. If you're not a member and you like what you hear this evening, please join us because we're growing in numbers. We are the fastest growing political party in the United Kingdom. Probably one of the fastest growing political parties in the world. Yeah, why not? Why not big it up? My mother used to say, big it up, son. Big it up. So I'm bigging it up. But it's true. Because did you know that David Cameron has halved the membership of the Conservative Party since he took over control? That is hardly something you'd want to brag about, is it? They are coming to us, former Tories, in large numbers. Yes, that's true, they are. But for me, the people I want to see are what I would call old Labour. The working class, decent, honest people that get out of their beds on a cold winter's morning, go to a factory, do a shift and come home. Because for me, they are the people who have been most let down over, well, since the end of the Second World War, frankly. They are the people who have suffered the greatest. So I would urge all Labour people, anybody who's in this audience tonight, to join us. Because we want you. We want you to form the party of the future and the politics of the future under the banner of the United Kingdom Independence Party. So please, I urge you to join us. I'm holding this up for a reason. You always know there's a catch when there's something like this. You just know there's a catch. All the rest is for nothing. But we would like you to donate £1 if you take one of these. If you take one of these, please. It's for our growing campaign fund, because next year we've got even bigger elections and even more council elections than we have on the 2nd of May. And of course we have the European elections. which I think Paul's going to talk about in just a second. So while we wait for Nigel to arrive, I'm going to introduce Mr. Paul Nuttall, the Deputy Leader of the UK Independence Party. Paul.
Well, thank you. I know most of you, obviously, well, virtually all of you aren't here to hear me speak tonight. Many of you have heard me speak as I have gone around the region and done many meetings like this. I must say I'm very impressed with the excellent turnout here tonight, and you've put on a really good show for Nigel. I mean, Nigel is travelling around the country at the moment from town to town, city to city, trying to drum up support for UKIP as we go in to these local elections. And I'm basically quickly going to talk about where we are as a region. I mean, we're the Northwest region, about 7.5 million people, which I represent, which goes everywhere from Crewe to Carlisle. So basically from the West Midlands right up to the Scottish border. And that includes Lancashire. And I'm proud to announce tonight that we have more candidates in Lancashire for the county council elections than we've ever had before, and that is due to the hard work of you guys on the ground and also the team in the office. And I believe that Fred deserves a large round of applause for getting all of those candidates together. Please give Fred. And of course, we have our local candidate. Paul, where are you? Paul, stand up.
Here's the man.
Paul Thompson, our local candidate. I think with your help, Paul can get over the line and really shake things up in this area and be our first elected Lancashire County Councillor. Because local elections are important. Local elections are the key, they're the lifeblood of any political party. In the past, UKIP has always gone down the line of maybe thinking that local elections don't really matter too much, which was a mistake. Because many times you hear people say, well, how is being a local councillor going to get us out of the European Union? Well, it doesn't work like that. We're not a pressure group, we're a political party. And political parties stand in elections. And we have a duty to give everybody the opportunity to put a cross next to the name of a UKIP candidate. That is what political parties do. They stand in elections, and we will be standing in as many local elections as possible. And it's not just these county council elections. We have by-elections right across the region at the moment where we will be putting up candidates. And elections are key, because I believe the only way you will get people elected to Westminster is by getting local councillors elected first. You get one local elected councillor who does a good job, you can then go on and get 2 and then get 4, and then that hopefully will put you in a position, popular in the local community, to go on and win that seat. And that's what UKIP has grown into. UKIP has moved from being a single issue pressure group which talks only about Europe to being a political party with a large raft of policies which we believe are quite radical, which are different than the establishment parties at Westminster, and we believe that is the reason why people are flocking to the UKIP cause. I'm not going to go into these policies because that is the job of our leader who will be speaking in a moment. But what I can tell you is that the opinion polls are fascinating. Yes, we're polling well across the country. Yes, I think the last opinion poll had us around 17%, which is double what the Liberal Democrats are polling at the moment. That is a great success, and that is a testament to the hard work that our guys on the ground are putting in. Our foot soldiers, people putting leaflets through doors, people writing letters to papers, people just generally going out and speaking in their local community. That is what UKIP has grown into, and that is why we're polling so well nationally. Locally, we're polling even better. Locally, I think there was an opinion poll out late last year which puts us on 19%. That's 19%. The Conservatives were on 18 and the Liberal Democrats were on a very poor 7. So in the Northwest region, UKIP is now, I believe, moving into the sphere of being the opposition, the real opposition. not a social democratic party like the others, not a party that speaks the same language as those as Westminster, but a political party that gives everybody an opportunity to think outside the box and give everybody a real alternative. So polling is exciting, but what we need to do is to change those polls into votes, and that's why we will be working tooth and nail, day and night, from now till May the 2nd in this region, to ensure that we get councillors on Lancashire County Council, and not just on Lancashire County Council, but Cumbria County Council as well, because that will give us a solid base to go on and move into the European elections next year. Now let me just tell you a quick story about the European elections last time round. We had one MEP elected in this region, and that was me. Many of us were confident that we were going to get 2. I generally thought it was going to be touch and go. I didn't realise just how close it was going to be. There were 1.4 million votes cast in that election in this region, and we missed out on that second seat by a mere 1,000 votes. It was heartbreaking at the time, and that night we made a promise, a pledge to ourselves that we will never feel like that ever again. We will never go in to account for European election, and we will never lose out in such circumstances. We will get 2 next time round. It will double the resources that we have in the region. But I actually think that if we put in the effort, if we work as we're going to work for these county council elections, if membership continues to grow, and I'll come on to that in a minute, we can secure 3 seats in this region and create a political earthquake. Because those seats are up for grabs. We know the Conservatives are going to lose 1 seat in the European elections. We know that the BNP are finished in this country, in this region as well, and we also know that the Liberal Democrats are touch and go. We believe we can take their seats. We believe that we can send more people back to the European Parliament in this region than any other political party. And membership is growing as well. When Fred and I took over back in 2008, we had 850 members. We now have over 2,000, and that is growing on a daily basis. If we continue on this upward trajectory, then I guess that we could be well in excess of 3,000 come 2014. This is a growing party. This is a party which is taking the best from the last century in terms of policy, because in some areas, if it isn't broken, you don't have to fix it. And they've meddled too much and tried to fix things that aren't broken, but we have to be a political party that looks forward into the 21st century as well, and we have to create an environment where our youngsters can prosper. Now, we then move on to look at 2015. If we go on and we win those European elections, we can create a political earthquake in this country at the general election in 2015. If we are continuing to poll like we are at the moment and continue to go up in those polls, all bets are off. We can change Britain forever. We can put UKIP MPs in Westminster. UKIP MPs who will be different from the rest. UKIP MPs who will work for their community, who will not just disappear to London and not be seen again. UKIP MPs who you can be proud to call your local representative. And that is our goal, and that is why in this region, I think there's 73 Westminster seats, we will be putting a UKIP candidate in every single seat, because as I said earlier, every single person, young, old, doesn't matter what colour, doesn't matter what religion, has a right to vote for a UKIP candidate on the policies that we put forward. Now, of course, my big thing, personally, is education. I spoke at the UKIP conference only a couple of weeks ago on the issue of education. It's something which I'm very passionate about. Now, I've worked in further education colleges, I've worked at universities, I've worked at a primary school, many years ago. Obviously, I've been through education, whether it's at A-level, diploma, degree, higher degree. I've spent all my life, pretty much before I was elected, in education. I'm from the docks by Bootle. Obviously, you know.
Yeah.
And I feel that the education system in working class communities has let working class kids down. If you're rich, if you're well off, you can buy yourself into a decent area and you can put your child in a decent school. But if you're poor, like my parents were, you can't afford to send your child to a good school and your kid ends up in a bog standard comprehensive school. And I think that that is an absolute disgrace, and I think we're letting down working class communities. And just to give you one policy, I hope I'm not trumping Nigel on this, one policy that UKIP has is that we believe in academic selection. We believe that whether you're working class or middle class, you should have the same start in life, and we believe to even things up, we need to bring back academic selection into our schools so we have education by ability and not by wealth. And to tell you a few amazing statistics, do you know that the top 8 schools in this country send more kids to Oxford and Cambridge than the bottom 2,000 put together? Did you know that there were more working class kids from state schools at Oxford and Cambridge in the 1960s than there is now? How, I ask you, can that be right if we're meant to be a progressive society? Social mobility has slowed down in this country, and what the comprehensive system has done, and if you notice, none of these Labour politicians who think comprehensive schools are wonderful send their kids to comprehensive schools. They all send their kids private. I wonder why, I ask. And what we want to see is a return to academic selection and a grammar school in every single town and every single borough in this country, because that is the way to help working class kids break out of their communities and better their lives. Now, as Fred mentioned earlier, this pamphlet is for sale. It's £1, you can pick it up at the back. It's basically about the European Parliament. I'm an MEP, it's what I do for a living. And some of the figures that you will read in this pamphlet will bring tears to your eyes. You will find out, for example, and I hope actually I'm not doing myself out of some money here, because this is money which is going to the region to help fight these elections. You know, there are 30,000 Eurocrats in Brussels. Over 1,500 of them earn more than the British Prime Minister. Austerity doesn't exist in the European Union. Austerity doesn't exist in Brussels. They're calling for an increase to the European Parliament budget year on year. And although Cameron can say that he secured a reduction in the budget, strangely enough, Britain's contributions will continue to go up year on year. It is a false promise. He's a paper tiger. The man believes in the European project, and Nigel will talk about a referendum, I'm sure, in his speech. All I will say is it's pie in the sky, some vague promise of a referendum, some years down the line, based on whether you do or you don't win the general election, quite frankly, isn't good enough. We want a referendum, and we want that referendum in this Parliament. So I believe we have a fantastic opportunity, because the one thing that we're finding from UKIP right now, and the one thing we're finding from the new UKIP members who are coming into this party, is they're not left, they're not right. They're just about one thing: common sense. They're old Labour, they're Conservatives, there's a few Liberal Democrats. We're picking up people from right across the political spectrum. We're giving people a home. We're giving people who haven't voted for many years the opportunity to go out and vote for a political party for the first time, in some cases in 20 years, to go out and vote for UKIP because we're different, because we're seen as exciting, because our brand is now seen as a forward-thinking brand, and I believe that this party is going places. And actually, I'm just going to thank you, and please give yourself a round of applause for putting in such hard work and for making this party what it is today. Please give yourself a round of applause. And of course, the theme of common sense will run right through Nigel's speech. Whether we're talking about wind farms, whether we're talking about education, whether we're talking about defence, whether we're talking about the NHS, the EU and immigration, UKIP's philosophy is about one thing, and that is common sense, and it's about bringing politics back to the people. It's about pavement politics. You know, the great thing about Nigel coming here tonight, and the great thing about Nigel's talk, is that for me, as a historian, it's like old-fashioned politics, really. When politicians and leaders will go out, give speeches to big audiences, and meet and interact with the electors and the people. You don't get Ed Miliband doing that. You don't get David Cameron doing that. You certainly don't get Nick Clegg doing that. This is a public meeting. It's open to anybody. We want to hear what you have to say. We'll share a drink with you at the end of the night. Nothing is scripted. Nothing is organised by PR gurus or press people. This is all off the cuff. This is our opportunity to listen to your concerns and for you to have the opportunity to listen to what we have to say. So if you are a member, well done. You're doing a fantastic job, a grand job. Keep up the hard work. If you're not a member, if you like what we have to say, please, as Fred said earlier, there are membership forms on your chairs. Pick them up, fill them in. There'll be somebody at the back, obviously, taking your details, phone numbers, email addresses, because what we want to see is our membership rise, and we want people from all political backgrounds. Don't just think that this is a political party made up of disgruntled ex-Conservatives. The majority of our votes at the last European elections came from the old, patriotic Labour working class. People who feel left behind by New Labour. People who feel that Tony Blair and Gordon Brown and now Ed Miliband have turned their back on their core vote. And we are offering an opportunity to you to say, please, come to us, listen to what we have to say, because this party is moving forward. This party is the future. Thank you very much.
Anybody want to sit down? Come and take a seat.
Yeah, please. Have seats. Take seats, thanks.
Yes, please fill the seats up. We don't want standing. We don't charge for the seats. Please, no. I asked them, they wouldn't let me away with it. Just a very quick story I thought I'd tell you before Nigel comes in. Well, oh no, not those old stories. Yes, yes. Somebody asked me just a couple of days ago why I personally had joined this party. It was quite an elderly lady. She must have been in her 90s. I didn't like to ask, because you don't ask a lady her age. It does get you in deep trouble. So I thought, well, a lot of reasons really, I suppose. And she said, I want to give you something. And I said, oh, really, thank you. And she pressed a £5 note in my hand. I was canvassing actually up in the Lancaster area. And she pressed a £5 note in my hand. And I said, oh, thank you very much. Are you sure? Because I thought she didn't look particularly well off. Well, she looked like she was struggling a little bit. I said, well, are you sure? Thanks very much. And she said, yes. And I said, why have you given me the £5? She said, well, I want to tell you something. She said, son, I haven't voted for a long, long time. She said, it was actually, I can't remember how long ago it was that I actually voted. She says, but I'm voting for your party, this UKIP. She says, because I've listened to Nigel Farage on the television, and I saw Paul Nuttall on Question Time, and I've listened to some of your other people who have managed to get some press. And she said, the £5 is for one thing. She said, I want to thank you because you've given me one thing, hope. And I thought that was an amazing thing for her to say. and quite a charming thing for her to say. And I suppose if I was sensible enough or I'd been clever enough at the time, I would have told her that the reason I joined this party is that I saw it as hope for the future for all of us here. So if you take that thought away with you tonight, I think that will be one thing that you can actually sleep easy on, that you have hope. Because on May the 2nd in this area, you can put an X in a box for a UK Independence Party candidate. You have a choice now. Finally, you have a choice. Take that opportunity. Make sure you tell your workmates, your friends, your neighbours, your colleagues, people in the dog's home, anybody. Tell them all to turn out on May the 2nd, even if they say they've never voted for 4. Tell them that this is the party of hope. Hope for all our futures. So it is your duty to turn up on May the 2nd and vote for us. Please do that. I'm just going to check if Nigel is finished with the television thing yet. Steve? Nigel? You want me to tell you another story? No. You don't really, do you? Steve, can you just check if he's free, please? I'm in big demand for TV sometimes. My mother said I've a great face for radio. He's coming now. Can I just ask out of nosiness, how many people in the room are not members of UKIP? Can I ask, if you don't mind? You don't have to tell me. Really? That many not members? How many are going to be after tonight? Oh, okay, that'll do. I thought more of you would put your hand up, really. There you go. He's on his way. I hope. I do hope. One thing we're not good at is timing, isn't it?
Sing us a song.
Fred.
What?
Sadly, Frank Carson's not here to warm us up tonight.
I can't do a song. No, I'm not. I can do an old Perry Como and karaoke. Who remembers Perry Como? Ah, you showed your age now.
We've heard you.
Where's Granville? Where's Granville gone?
Sorry?
Granville. Where's Granville? You remember Perry Como?
Oh, do I just? And Johnny Ray for him.
Okay. Okay, at last. You get rid of me at last, don't you? Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to introduce the leader of the UK Independence Party, Nigel Farage.
Good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
How do I pronounce it? Oswaldtwistle. Is that right or not? No, look, I'm not on the ballot paper, so the fact that I can't pronounce it doesn't mean you should discriminate against UKIP. It's been a pretty remarkable period for our party. You might have noticed a few weeks ago there was a by-election in a place called Eastleigh, and we got 28% of the vote. And everybody said, oh well, it's a protest vote, mid-term protest vote. And if they really wanted to be insulting, they said it's just a protest vote. And anyway, all we were doing was just taking a few votes off the Conservatives, and that'd be that. I'll tell you the really interesting thing about that Eastleigh result, and it was that a lot of money was spent by Lord Ashcroft and others analysing where did the UKIP vote come from. And a third of it came from Tory voters. Just over a third of it came from Lib Dem voters. A chunk of it came from old Labour voters, and really interestingly, 10% of our vote came from people who had not voted for at least 20 years or never voted in their lives, but saw what UKIP was saying as being absolutely vital to the future of this country. That, by definition, folks, is not a protest vote, and I'm proud of the fact that we're drawing support across every section of the British community who are rallying to our cry, which is this nation must govern itself and not be told what we can and can't do by the unelected bureaucrats in Brussels. So it's working. You know, years ago when people talked about the European Union, it was almost as if it was an academic debate, something that perhaps should be discussed at university debating unions, but really, how is this ever going to affect the lives of ordinary folk? And I think that's all changed. I think the idea that we give away £53 million a day as a membership fee to this club, whilst we know we're living in straitened times here, I think most people say, we certainly say in UKIP, why on earth should we pay a penny piece to be a member of a political union that none of us have ever voted for? And I say never voted for. You've got to be 55 years old now to have voted in the referendum back in 1975. There's one or two of you here that qualify for that, aren't there? And I bet there's a few of you here who voted yes in 1975, as my mum and dad did, because they believed what they were. You voted no, sir, didn't you? You saw through them.
I don't know anybody that did vote.
You saw through them. Well, a majority did vote yes, but what they voted for was a common market. They didn't vote yes for political union, they voted for trade, they voted for cooperation. And look, you know, we want to be a pro-European, but not pro-European Union party. I don't hate Europe. I don't think south of Calais everything's awful. In fact, far from it, I rather like Europe. It's quite a nice place to go on holiday, isn't it? Different languages, different cultures, different wines, different cheeses. I mean, really, Europe is the most diverse cultural part of the whole planet. But I now feel that the way the European Union has gone, not only is it bad for us, but it's now become bad for most of Europe too. You know, thank goodness we didn't listen to the Lib Dems and Blair and Ken Clarke. Thank goodness we stayed out of the euro. But look at the countries that did join the euro. And look at the lengths they've gone to preserve the euro. You know, the Greek Prime Minister 2 years ago said perhaps there should be a referendum on whether Greece stays in the euro. And within 2 days, the bully boys in Brussels had him removed as Prime Minister and replaced by a puppet friend of theirs. The same thing even happened in Italy. A big country where Mr. Berlusconi, well, there's a lot we could say about Mr. Berlusconi, I suppose, but Mr. Berlusconi said he doubted whether the euro was suiting Italy, and he was removed and replaced by Mr. Monti, who was unelected and who chose an entire cabinet of people, not one of whom was actually a directly elected politician. And I thought, well, they can't ever sink lower than that. And now, with Cyprus, they've decided that the money in your bank account is fair game if it can be used to keep afloat the euro project. So they're capable of doing anything, and I don't just want Britain out of the EU, I want the whole of Europe out of the European Union, and let's have a Europe of democratic nation states. We'll trade together, be friends together, and that'll be a much better world than a Europe governed by my old mate Herman Van Rompuy. I think also the penny has dropped in this country, that something has gone wrong with our immigration policy in Britain. You know, from the early 1950s right through pretty much to the end of the century, we had a managed migration policy in Britain where something like 30 to 50,000 people a year would come to a country of 60 million, and that's where the numbers ran. Then Blair got elected and decided we'd open the doors to much of the rest of the world. And then, of course, Poland and Latvia and Lithuania and other much poorer countries joined the European Union with total unlimited access to this country. Now, the Home Secretary at the time, David Blunkett, said it would lead to an extra 15,000 people a year coming to Britain. That's right, 15,000 a year. You wouldn't want him managing your money, would you? 1 million came in the first 2 years. And whilst a lot went back, an awful lot didn't go back. And immigration into Britain over the last 10 years has been running at an average of 500,000 people a year. So we've gone from 30 to 50,000 to 500,000 people a year. And frankly, it is madness. It is complete madness that we have a massive oversupply in the unskilled labour market in this country. Do you know, youth unemployment in 2004 was 600,000, which was high enough. Youth unemployment now is 1 million. And the main reason is that they're being displaced. Because, you know, the big agricultural companies, many of the big building companies are happier to employ teams of Poles who they can pay no more than the minimum wage, make work all the hours God sends, and in effect we're almost now discriminating against our own people. And to make that worse, and it was Blair that started it, but now they all do it, they all say that British youth are all lazy and useless. What a way to talk about your own people. It's astonishing, isn't it? And there's no doubt some of our people are lazy and useless, as in every country some of our people are lazy and useless. But we're literally writing off all our youngsters as being bad eggs, and that's why we need to have a complete open door. Well, it's wrong, and it's about time we started to say that one of the things we've really got to do is we've got to get young British people off benefits, back to work, with a tax system that encourages them to do so. But it gets worse than that. Thank you. In fact, do it again, I can have a sip. But it's worse than that, because from 2004 onwards, if you came to Britain, you couldn't claim benefits until you'd paid your stamp for at least a year. But now, you can come to Britain, and if on day one you say you're self-employed and seeking work, you qualify for job seekers allowance on day one, and within a fortnight you will get housing benefit. Oh, and by the way, if you've got 8 kids living back in Warsaw, you can claim for child benefit for every single one of them. Now, our argument, and please bear in mind, you know, we are not against anybody from any part of the world, but we think it's about time we started to put the interests of our own people first. That really is the point. So our argument is that nobody coming to this country should be able to claim benefit until they've been here, worked for at least 5 years, paid their taxes and obeyed the law. Then they can qualify for benefit, not before. Now, talking about this question has been one of the most difficult things in British politics. Indeed, it's been forbidden, really, hasn't it? Yeah. You know, we've been told by everybody that if you discuss immigration, it means you're racist and nasty and a really horrible person. The sort of description that David Cameron saves for UKIP, generally. And they've tried to do everything they can to brush this issue under the carpet and for us not to have a proper national debate on the issue. Well, we have been talking about it since 2004. We've taken a lot of stick, a lot of abuse for doing so. But isn't it funny that as UKIP have risen in the polls and started to do better in the by-elections, that now they're all talking about it?
True.
In fact, in the last month, there's been a bidding war going on between Cameron, Clegg and Miliband for who can sound the toughest on immigration. In fact, some of them have sounded so right-wing, they've shocked me, really, with what they've been saying. But the point is, all they're doing is they're pandering to you. They're saying, we understand why you're upset. We understand why you're concerned. But what they cannot do, and will not do, is offer a solution. Because our challenge to them is, as the rules are currently laid, on January the 1st next year, we will open up our labour market and our benefit system to 29 million people from Romania and Bulgaria, countries that are infinitely poorer than the last group that joined back in 2004. 44% of Bulgarians are living below the poverty line and are incapable of heating their own houses during this long cold winter. And there have been riots on the streets there. Paul in fact visited and saw the place and was pretty shocked, I think, by what he saw. There have been hundreds of thousands of people rioting on the streets. The government has fallen. The country is collapsing. is in the grip of organised crime. And what we're saying is, does it make sense, with 1 million of our youngsters unemployed already, does it make sense to open up our labour market to Bulgaria and Romania? Well, it's obvious to us that it doesn't. And our challenge to the other three is, why not say we're not going to allow a total open door and access to work and benefits to Bulgaria and Romania? And why won't they answer? Because they're all committed to something called the European project. And they all believe that it's in our interest and it's a good thing. And I think that issue is going to gain us a lot of votes on May the 2nd in these county council elections, because frankly the only way we can control who decides to come and live, work and settle in this country is by not being part of the European Union. It's the only way we can get back control over this issue. And my goodness me, this does impact on county councils, because the job of county councils is to provide services. And if there are more people that need those services, the job becomes tougher for county councils to deliver. In some parts of the country, we have seen public officials who've been honest about it. The former Chief Constable of Cambridgeshire, Julie Spence, said that with the massive increase in population they'd seen in Cambridgeshire, that the pressure on places at primary schools, the pressure on GPs, dentists, hospitals, policing, the fire service had actually become intolerable because the population had grown too quickly for the infrastructure that we had. So I think this is a relevant issue coming up in county council elections. I also think, as I drove here this evening, I noticed that some of our historic northern hills have recently been vandalised. I'm right, aren't I? Ugly, disgusting, useless, bird-slicing, expensive wind turbines that don't actually reduce CO2 emissions and add 12% on all of your electricity bills. You're all paying a 12% surplus to fund what is called the renewable energy target. The target that was agreed in Brussels, of course, as everything is. And does anyone know where that money goes? Who really benefits from paying this surcharge on our electricity bill? I'll tell you who benefits. It's the rich that benefit. David Cameron's father-in-law, Sir Reginald Sheffield, is paid £1,000 a day for just allowing wind turbines to be on his land. So the next time you pay your electricity bill, you can think to yourself, isn't my money going to a good cause? It is transferring vast amounts of money from poorer people to richer people. It is despoiling our landscape. It is all being done to meet carbon emission targets that were agreed in Brussels, and it's all being done to stop global warming. I hadn't noticed much this week travelling around England, I got to tell you. And it's also worth noting that global temperatures have not risen for the last 17 years. So we might be doing all of this to not much purpose. And certainly what we're doing in these parts of the country that traditionally had manufacturing industries, the north of England, what we're doing is we're making them pay a 20% surcharge on the electricity they consume, and we then tax them for whatever CO2 they emit. And we wonder why, in the course of the last year, both our aluminium smelters, large parts of our steel production, now the threat the cement industry will go as well, people are leaving here and going to India and manufacturing the same products in India. So even if we were concerned about carbon dioxide emissions, it's a zero-sum game, isn't it? They stop producing here, they go there to produce. So UKIP county councillors will fight against wind turbine applications, not as NIMBYs, saying not in my backyard, build it half a mile down the valley. We will oppose every single wind turbine project in Lancashire and around the country on the principle that it does not work and it needs to be stopped before too much of our countryside is through. But I also feel that we've rather lost faith in politics in this country. Or to be more accurate, we've rather lost faith in our politicians. Because we look at the three parties, and we look at the leaders, we look at the front benches, and what we see are a group of people who chiefly have all gone to the same schools, all gone to the same Oxbridge colleges, all gone straight into research departments of political parties, become MPs aged 27, ministers aged 40, and not one of them has ever done a day's work in their lives, and they are completely disconnected from the thoughts, hopes and aspirations of ordinary British families and people out there struggling and trying to run businesses. You know, they look the same, they sound the same, they're dull, they're boring, they don't even have any hobbies. They spend Sundays sitting around the table talking about politics, they marry each other's sisters, and they are they are completely disconnected from real life. But I also feel that some of that disenchantment is reflected. I'll probably get sued for that, but anyway, it doesn't really matter. We also feel a disconnect with local politics too. Increasingly a feeling that whoever we send onto the county council, do you know what? It doesn't really make much difference because their policies aren't terribly far apart. And what I want us to do is to put some different men and women into local politics. I think we've proved in the European Parliament that having a UKIP voice has changed the entire debate. We've certainly injected a bit of life into the place, I can tell you. They love me over there, they really do.
True.
Well, they fine me occasionally, but it's all right, we can live with that. And I think as far as national politics is concerned, we are changing the arguments. You know, Mr. Cameron's now even promising us a referendum. How about that? That's good, isn't it? He says, if I win the next general election. I mean, I just sort of burst out laughing when I hear that, because he hasn't got a chance. Following a renegotiation, nobody in Brussels is in the mood to renegotiate anything. He tells us at the end of 2017, which is nearly 5 years' time, he'll give us a referendum. Trouble is, we've heard it all before, haven't we? Yeah. Dave, as he likes to be known, as he goes around without a tie, pretending to be the common man. Dave made us this promise before. In fact, he gave us a cast iron guarantee, if you remember, that if he became Prime Minister, there'd be a referendum on the Lisbon Treaty, and he did not deliver. So we don't trust him, we don't believe him, or Miliband, or Clegg, or any of them. We simply don't believe them. But we have managed to change the debate on Europe. We've certainly changed the debate on immigration. I think our message on wind turbines and some of the stupid things we're doing in the name of renewable energy, that is now beginning to get through. And I want us to go in and transform local politics as well. Because we need some voices there asking some important questions. Like, why are all these council officials now paid such vast sums of money? How's that happened? You know, the bloke working on the front line as the, you know, working for the council as the gravedigger has had his salary cut by 30%, but nobody at the top seems to be paying the price. So let's put some UKIP people in there, and let's start to expose what's happening to our money at local government level too. How many climate change officers are still employed by the county council? In most cases, several, believe it or not. How much money is being spent on interpreting Eastern European languages? Let's get in there and fight and expose some of this stuff. Let's get in there as a party that is not hidebound by political correctness, and we're unafraid to speak the truth as we see it. And let's try and reinvigorate local democracy with the concept that if there is a major issue, a major planning issue that affects a county, rather than the majority view being ridden roughshod over, which happens time and again all around the country, let's campaign and fight for local residents to have binding referendums on key issues like that. I've been travelling all around the UK this week, started off in Cornwall, and we've been up through all the counties, and we're here tonight in Carlisle tomorrow, and I can tell you that we as a party are putting a bigger push into this election than we have ever done for any domestic election in this country. And I mustn't get carried away with things, but I genuinely believe we've got a real opportunity to build a bridgehead onto county councils, including Lancashire, up and down the country, and when we get some UKIP people there onto those county councils, you will start to see a different kind of local politics. So I would ask people to go out on May the 2nd, to vote for our candidates, and let's shake up local government the way we've shaken up national government. Thank you.
We'll take some questions. Anyone in the audience would like to ask a question, please do so.
Fred, I've got one from, I'm reading this on behalf of my next door neighbour actually. As an OEP, will you give your stand on cost of electricity and gas, also petrol taxes, particularly on mobility cars, which are crippling us? It's a fact that whether we have to choose whether to eat or heat. After paying in taxes for 50, 60 years, we are now being downgraded to as parasites that are draining our own country. Disabled people need to be helped. It could be vouchers for food or fuel or bigger tax cuts. How do we feel about this?
Right, well there's quite a lot there actually, isn't there?
Yeah.
But let me just pick out a couple of examples of what's been asked and give an answer to it. What would we do about electricity costs? Stop the wind turbine insanity right now and take 12% of everybody's electricity bill. That's a good start, isn't it?
That's a very good start.
It's a very good start.
Brilliant.
There is also, of course, in this part of the world, up off Blackpool, the possibility through shale gas that we could do what the Americans have done. Do you know the Americans in large parts of the States now have brought energy bills down for every household and every business by 50%. So why don't we stop wasting our time and money on wind energy and work out sensibly how we can go about fracking at minimum environmental cost up here in Lancashire? That strikes me as being the right answer to that question. I'll also pick up on mobility scooters, the cost of mobility scooters. We came across this in the European Parliament, do you remember?
Yep.
Mobility scooters, the most reliable brand, is made in the United States of America. And there's a German company trying to compete with them, but apparently their product isn't as good, isn't as well priced, and isn't as reliable. So most people opt for the American option. As a result of this, the European Union have put a 10% tariff on all mobility scooters that are imported from the USA and bought by disabled people in this country. It's truly shocking, isn't it? So, you know, we can't promise the earth to everybody, but we can say there are some sensible, practical ways here that we can help older people on fixed incomes who are finding life very difficult. We can at least make life a bit better for them.
Yes, sir.
What's your policy on the Polaris submarines? Or do you have one at the moment?
Yesterday's weapon for the Cold War is the first point to make. Second point to make is it's not an independent nuclear deterrent because we can't use it without the say-so of the Americans. And I've been a big supporter of strong defence in this country, and I think in particular what we've done to conventional defence has just simply been appalling. You know, I mean, I'm from the south. I'm in Portsmouth. Portsmouth is now, the museum part of Portsmouth has got more ships in it than the Royal Navy's got. I mean, that's literally, sir, what we've done. In fact, we need to do spectacularly well in the European elections next year. And I honestly believe if this party in 2009 could come second across the country in the European elections, and the only reason the Tories beat us was because every Cameron leaflet said, I give you this cast iron guarantee. He's now a bit like the boy that cried wolf, isn't he? Even if he means it, no one's going to believe him. I think we've got a real opportunity next year to cause an earthquake in British politics by winning those European elections. If we do those two things, and our position in the opinion polls stays at double that of the Lib Dems, frankly, it would be completely farcical if UKIP was not included in those national TV debates. And I think if they did exclude us, do you know what? I think we win either way. I think we win either way. We get, albeit we've got to get to that position with the party in good shape and the poll ratings strong, as they are now or stronger. But we'd actually win either way. One, we'd win by being on them, because I think actually our messages have a certain clarity to them. We are trying to provide policy solutions to major problems that this country faces. And I think if they excluded us, I think there really would be an upwelling of feeling amongst millions of people that the political elite had now become so absolutely closed shop in their mentality that here was an opportunity to teach the buggers a lesson.
The winning state pension, the nearer I've got to retirement, I'm getting it moved further and further away. I've been working 44 years, paid in, and now they've extended it to 66. They can't afford to let me retire. But yet they're paying people coming in the country benefits and sending the money abroad. I've got another, I've worked 51 years.
Yeah, I agree with you.
I know it's the same for them. I've just had another 2 years put on.
Yeah, I agree with you. Clearly it's wrong, as you say.
I've lost about £40,000.
Clearly it's wrong that we effectively have begun to discriminate against our own people. I completely agree with that sentiment. As far as pensions are concerned, it was realised some years ago that we were facing a very serious problem with this. And the problem simply was people are living longer and longer.
Well,
And
I keep reading the paper and they're not to me, because everybody I know. the retirement age was set in 1908.
Yes, it was.
I got the year right. He's the historian.
The Liberal government.
Yeah. So the retirement age was set in 1908, and for years we buried our head in the sand about this until 1997, and Blair, the new Prime Minister, appointed Frank Field, who said, "Go away, Frank, and think the unthinkable." And Frank Field went away and he thought the unthinkable, which was, if we maintain pension ages exactly where they were, the country by 2050 would not be able to afford to pay anybody pensions. So what Field suggested is that steadily from that moment in time we upped the age at which people would retire and did it on a gradual process. Blair, having asked him to think the unthinkable, then shelved the project and sacked Frank Field, and we left it for another 15 years. And now the government is trying to play catch up, and people like you are the victims. Unavoidably, whether we like it or not, the ages at which we start to get pensions has to go up. We can't argue against that. Things have changed. The average life expectancy for women, particularly now, has gone up an astonishing amount in the last few decades. But what I do think is where you should be angry is the fact that successive British governments ignored a problem that was absolutely obvious to everybody and would need to be confronted.
No, but there's all this youth. They're saying there's all these youths that want a job.
Yeah.
But they haven't given anybody opportunity to retire. I've got 2 years, another 2, I was 64, it went just 2 years.
Yeah.
Just like that. They haven't given me a warning, it was just last year.
Yeah, no, and that's why the Frank Field proposal was the right one, was to give people fair warning and to bring the thing in gradually, and now it's being done brutally, and you're left with the feeling that it's unfair, and the way that it's now being done is unfair. It is unfair, but, we've got, there are two things we can do, aren't there? There are two things we can do. Either we have to cut out unnecessary bits of government spending. So we can start with the European Union budget, we can follow it up with foreign aid, we can follow it up with the £60 billion a year we spend on quangos, who just seem to regulate our lives and make things more difficult for us. And the other thing we've got to do is we've got to start creating growth and wealth within the British economy. And this government, to be honest with you, is doing neither. It isn't actually cutting wasteful spending, it isn't producing growth, so it's in a panic. It has to do something, and you're paying the price for it.
Yes, sir.
Nigel, what are the chances of introducing proportional representation into the electoral system? After all, you got elected on proportional representation. I feel it's a lot fairer system.
Well, when you think about it, the old Liberal Party, who became the Lib Dems, spent nearly half a century arguing for proportional representation. And when the big moment came, and the Lib Dem leader had the opportunity to cut a deal, he just showed how completely unworldly he is, because he's never done a deal in his life. And what he settled for was a referendum on AV, which wasn't even a proportional system. It was a preferential system, which you couldn't explain to the public in one sentence, and the referendum was lost. So as far as PR is concerned, Clegg has blown it, and I don't think PR is going to be an issue again for some time to come. And the main reason is, if we had PR, they would be absolutely petrified of UKIP. Because the really interesting thing about UKIP is, it doesn't matter where you go across this country, you will find UKIP support. You know, our support crosses all the boundaries of age and class and geography. We cross all those boundaries. We came second in the European elections under PR. We're going to win them next year under PR. If we had PR in 2015, goodness knows how many people we would get elected to Westminster. So the main reason it won't come quickly is because we're doing as well as we are. Ultimately, the first past the post system is a brilliant system if you have two parties. Because it works, doesn't it? Because one of them gets 50% of the vote. You know, in American politics, the winner always has about 50% of the vote. But the first past the post system now has shown itself, frankly, to be obsolete. And the younger generation look at it and just don't engage. You know, 60% of the under 30s now do not vote at all. And I think we do need an element of PR in the system. And when the Jenkins Commission, Roy Jenkins, I mean, very little he ever did in his life I agreed with, but his proposal of the AV Plus system, where you'd have two ballot papers. One, you'd vote for, you know, the man or woman to represent Blackpool South, and the second piece of paper where you could express an opinion, and the Germans do this. I mean, who would have thought the Germans could teach us about democracy, eh? It's quite an interesting novel idea, isn't it? And the last 20% of German MPs are made up from that second ballot paper, and when you have that situation, everybody can feel that by going down to the polling booth, they can actually cast a vote that will lead to somebody being their voice in Parliament. So I completely agree with you. I think we do need an element of PR in the British system, but I fear it's some way off now.
Gentleman at the back there.
Could you talk about your policies on foreign aid?
Well, very interesting, isn't it? The figures that were out yesterday show that despite the fact we're a lot smaller, and despite the fact they're quite a bit wealthier, we are now spending more on foreign aid than Germany, and we are spending more on foreign aid than any country in percentage terms in the developed part of the world. We're top of the pops for foreign aid, and Dave feels really good about that. I think we're wasting very large amounts of money. Taxpayers' money, your money. We're wasting very large sums of money, and that money isn't achieving very much. You know, foreign aid doesn't work. If we want to help Black Africa and the poor third world, what we should do, outside the common agricultural policy, is bring down the huge tariffs we put on them. If they want to sell us cut flowers or green beans from Kenya or whatever it is, we should get rid of those tariffs and give them a chance to trade with us on fair terms and let them trade their way out of poverty. Just giving money to somebody who's poor, it doesn't matter how many times you do it, most of it gets swallowed up in corruption, and it never ever solves the problem. The foreign aid budget, the reason it's going up the way that it is that the elite Notting Hill set that run this country feel good about it. It's as simple as that.
Nigel, should we have a position or a manifesto pledge possibly regarding postal ballots? Because if they're not fraudulent, they certainly look like they are, and they cheapen everybody's idea of what a vote should be.
Postal ballots are something that I hold very close to my heart. When we had the Rotherham by-election, if you remember in the middle of it, that couple had 3 kids taken from them because they were UKIP. I mean, it's outrageous. When we got to the count at Rotherham, and I watched the boxes being opened, I thought, crikey, O'Reilly. We were neck and neck with Labour, literally neck and neck with Labour. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. You know, Rotherham, been Labour forever, big majority. Then we saw the postal votes, and the postal votes were 50% of the overall vote. So 50% of the turnout in that by-election was a postal vote, and the Labour Party had about 70% of the postal votes, and that's why they won with the margin they did. Similarly, in Eastleigh. In Eastleigh, there at the count on that night, and although I've been speaking in Chester before, so by the time I got there, I didn't actually see the boxes being opened, but you know, my people down there said we were topping the poll in box after box, particularly in Eastleigh town itself. And on the day, we got a clear majority of votes cast in the Eastleigh by-election. But then the postal votes came in, and the Lib Dems were still ahead. David Miliband has stood down, of course, in South Shields. There are 21,000 registered postal voters in South Shields. So now what happens with by-elections is, the party whose choice it is will call the by-election as quickly as they can. The postal votes go out within a few days. They, of course, know who all the postal voters are, and it's very difficult for us to get to them on time. There used to be, you know, a good reason for applying for a postal vote. And then the brilliant Blair brought in a piece of legislation in 2000 where you could apply, now I mean, work this out, you could apply for a postal vote without proof of identity. No, seriously, without proof of identity. And I will be slightly careful here what I say for once in my life, but when Paul and I had a look at the registers in Oldham, we saw 1 and 2 bedroom flats with 8 or 10 registered postal voters.
Same in Blackburn.
I'm sure it's the same in Blackburn. And now, 1 or 2 people have gone to prison over this. Birmingham particularly was a very well-known case. But, is that for me?
Yeah.
It's good here, isn't it?
Get the money off you later.
That's my fee for coming, Fred, isn't it? Now, they have, as a result of this, tightened up. So now, to get a postal vote, you have to prove who you are, thank goodness. But that's done nothing to undo the damage that was done for 7 years when this system was, I believe, being used fraudulently. I have spoken about this on the BBC. I put a submission in to the Electoral Commission, who are supposed to regulate this stuff, who have promised me there is going to be an inquiry. I have to say the north of England is far worse than the south of England for this. The old Labour towns, in which Labour have dominated forever, I'm afraid that there is a huge element of political corruption. And we've seen it, haven't we, with Doncaster and many, many examples of this. So what are we going to do about it? I actually think that the postal voting system has now fallen into such total disrepute that, frankly, we have to scrap the postal voting register and start again. Because otherwise, those 1-bedroom flats in Oldham will go on receiving 8 postal votes every time there's an election. We've got to put a stop to it and have more honest politics in this country.
Yeah, successive governments have systematically and gleefully dismantled British industry. Textiles, particularly around here, shipbuilding, steel, cars, trucks, mining, fishing, not me, Gov, they all say, it's not their fault, it's the last one. What would you do to revitalise major industry in this country?
Well, the first thing to say is we have to recognise that over time things change. And industries come, industries go, and with globalisation it is difficult for us to compete with the Far East in many areas. Alright? You know, what I'm saying is it's a tough old world out there. But what we have done to British manufacturing is to willfully pursue a policy that is driving them, if not out of business, overseas. I made the point earlier. Every company, every manufacturing company is paying a 20% surcharge on their electricity bill to pay for those pig ugly wind turbines up on the hills behind us this evening. So we've added cost. There are some industries, aluminium, very good example. To make aluminium, you need huge quantities of electricity, and that is why both aluminium smelters have closed down in Britain in the last 18 months. The other thing we've done to them is, and again this is all through European agreements, is we put upon them the carbon emissions trading scheme, which means they have to pay to buy permits to be able to produce CO2,
That's another
which has now become, CO2 has now become apparently the greatest poison on the planet. I thought it was part of how we all lived. As I understand it, market gardeners pump CO2 into the greenhouses because it makes plants grow better. But we've decided that it's the great enemy. So whichever way you look at it, it is damn difficult for British manufacturing. The other point, the third point I'll make, if I can, on manufacturing is this. The whole focus of the British government, of the Foreign Office, of many of our big businesses, the whole focus for 40 years or more has been Europe. We must think about Europe and forget about the rest of the world. You know, the rest of the world's out of date. It's Europe. That's where the big economic success is going to be. Well, just look at it. Europe's crumbling. And because of this, we haven't been able to forge the trade deals around the rest of the world that the British manufacturing industry is going to need, because it needs marketplaces. And actually, selling manufactured goods into other parts of Europe is not always easy, because that's kind of the Germans' job, if you understand what I mean. You know, they do rule the roost on this. So we need, once we're outside this European Union, to start forging our own trade links with other parts of the world. And I would suggest that a very good place to start would be a group of countries. There are 54 of them. There are 2 billion people living within those countries. They speak English. They have common law. They have similar accounting systems. And when we're in trouble, they come from all over the world to stand by our side and help us. And it's called the Commonwealth. Let's re-engage with the Commonwealth.
Nigel, do you think the public should continue to finance the BBC when all we get is biased reporting and in most cases no reporting was what's going on?
The one thing that is for certain is that if UKIP had to rely on the BBC, this meeting wouldn't be happening tonight, because we simply would never have existed. And all I can say personally is that I think that YouTube was invented specifically for me. I'm certain of it. And it's through YouTube and new media that that's actually bounced back. And if our stuff gets a big number of hits on YouTube, the BBC then kind of have to report what we've said and what we've done. I am not in favour of completely dismantling the BBC. I think, no, not completely dismantling. I think that globally, the BBC is a very important British brand, and we shouldn't underestimate that. You know, we may have our problems with how they report, the European question, the immigration question, and global warming. If I see that blooming polar bear on that diminishing iceberg again, I'll scream. So they have got much wrong, but globally it's important to us. And I also think that there are some services they provide that are important services that nobody else would. I think the World Service is actually a terribly important image brand thing for this country. So isn't it bizarre that it's the World Service that currently is taking all the cuts? But I really don't see now, with Sky and all the cable channels, I don't see why taxpayers' money should be used to outbid for who shows a football match against commercial organisations. I don't think the BBC needs to do that anymore, given the way things have changed. I don't think the BBC needs to spend as much money making comedy programmes. 40 years ago, they produced fantastic comedy programmes, but the world has changed. But the big worry is this. So I think, a slimmed down BBC that focuses more on radio than television, who could buy in programmes and show them, that would be a better BBC. That would be a licence fee maybe of £40 to £50 a year, as opposed to the licence fee we have today. But here is the big problem. The big problem is this, that if you want to look for a news story online, the place to go is the BBC website. They have the best website by an absolute mile, and the reason is they've got vast resources and nobody can compete with them. And one of the reasons that our national newspaper sales are declining as rapidly as they are, you might think it's a good thing, but I actually don't. I think we've got a wonderful press in this country because you've got every shade of opinion represented on that newsstand every morning. But people I talk to in the newspaper industry, it's rumoured that I have dinner with some of them from time to time, and the people that I talk to in that industry say we cannot compete as news services, as national papers, as local radio, as independent television. We cannot compete for news with the BBC website because of the amount of resource that it's got. And so it's actually becoming, in terms of instant news reporting, a real monopoly situation. And I have to tell you, I haven't yet thought through how we deal with that. That is a very real issue. And I don't know what the answer to that is. So a slimmed down BBC, a BBC that actually gets off the back of the free market, where cable and everybody else can compete to show football matches or boxing matches or whatever it may be. But how we deal with the dominance of the BBC website, I have not yet found an answer.
Nigel, may I ask
Sorry,
a question? One of my concerns, and I employ lots of people in Lancashire, is to do with the Eton school. Could you explain where you have come from?
Right, well, okay, did you hear the question at the back? The question at the back was, the gentleman said, I employ lots of people in Lancashire, and he said, I'm worried about the dominance of Eton College over the life of this country, and he wanted me to explain my background. How long have you got? I come from an incredibly middle-class southern background, all right? My father was a stockbroker and a Territorial Army soldier for half a century. My grandfather was a stockbroker. My other grandfather was Chief Superintendent of the Fraud Squad at Scotland Yard. We are a middle-class family. We've never been rich, but we've never been poor. We were all educated privately. I didn't go to Eton though, but we were all educated privately. And I'll be the first to admit I had some huge advantages and privilege in life. But, unlike the other party leaders and the other party front benchers, unlike them, I actually had a job. Amazing, isn't it? Somebody in politics that had a job. And for 20 years, I worked in the commodities industry, non-ferrous base metals, dealing in copper, aluminium, lead, tin, nickel, all of those things. In those days, I had big clients up in the north west of England. You know, BICC cables. You know, was a regular doing business with BICC cables, and as the gentleman said, it's all, I'm afraid, or much of it, has gone. I did that for 20 years, and I always say that unlike them, I worked damned hard in the private sector for 20 years, up until lunchtime, every single day. It went wrong after that occasionally. For the last 9 years of that, I ran my own company. I was the managing director of my own company with my own cash and my own capital in it, And I had to make decisions on hiring people and firing people. And I think through that 9 years, more than anything else, I got to understand that what politicians do has a huge impact on how businesses are run. And I feel, whatever my background may be, I feel that I'm quite capable of talking to anybody in this country. And there was a piece in The Guardian last week. It said the 3 parties in England spend huge amounts of money through research polling trying to find out what the man in the pub is saying. The UKIP leader goes into the pub and finds out for himself.
Yes, lady here.
Yes.
Do you think you ever capable of forming a government? Apart from that comedy group in Westminster, what happens to you up with each other?
Well, would I be capable of forming a government? Well, I'm not sure the current lot are capable of forming a government. And I almost flipped, but to say that we couldn't do worse than they would. Look, you know, I mean, it would be stupid of me to get all hubristic about what UKIP has done in the last couple of years. All I know is this. You know, we've made this party now a mainstream force in British politics. We are clearly established in the polls as being the third party above the Lib Dems. We did fantastically well in the last 4 or 5 parliamentary by-elections, and I passionately hope and believe we're going to make some breakthroughs on May the 2nd. I think we can win the European elections next year if we get ourselves organised properly, and I believe then we will mount a challenge in 2015 from which we can get a significant number of people elected to the Westminster Parliament. I believe that what UKIP is doing is going, through one means or another, to fundamentally change for the better the country our children and grandchildren live in. That's what I know. But to say right now that I'm going to form a government at some point in the future would, I think, be a step too far and would look damned arrogant. But I'm just pleased that the things we've battled for so long are now coming to the fore.
So it'd always be the big 3?
I didn't say that. I didn't say that. I actually think there is more chance. I think what is happening with UKIP now is the biggest change in English politics since the rise of the Labour Party 100 years ago. All right, there is something very big and very fundamental going on, but I'm not going to be drawn in to answer a question that would appear to be arrogant. What is amusing is when I think back, John Whittaker here has been in the thing for 20 years or nearly, or whatever it is, and when I think back, I mean, the sheer level of mockery that I, in particular me, well, it's always me, it could be the colour of the trousers perhaps, I'm not sure, but the sheer level of mockery that we had to put up with, I mean, it really was amazing. Written off, you know, cranks and lunatics and gadflies and fruitcakes, and it all reminds me where we are now compared to them. It all reminds me of a lovely story that the late great stand-up comedian Bob Monkhouse used to tell. And Bob Monkhouse used to say, when I was younger, I told my friends and family that when I was grown up, I was going to become a comedian. And they laughed at me. Well, he said, they're not laughing now.
Mr. Farage, first of all, I'm sure everybody will join with me in wishing all the prospective candidates in the local elections the very best of luck.
Thank you.
The one thing that really worries me much more than anything else, and both you and Mr. Nuttall have hit on it several times tonight, but there are 2 things about the referendum that immediately came to mind. I think we must have that referendum, in and out referendum, on Europe, PDQ. Absolutely, as soon as we can. And what I want to know is, how can it be done? There are 2 things that worry me on this, and the first one was brought about by a market research personal letter from one David Cameron. I think he was an honourable, or so somebody said it, honourable Mr. David Cameron, and I think number 18 on that questionnaire of what, please list 3 of the things that you would most like out of this list to be done. Now, having gone through those 17, I think there are only 2 of them that wouldn't be directly affected by our position with Europe. In other words, all the other things would be affected by our future in or out of Europe. And therefore, I feel, thank you, that this has to be sorted out as soon as possible. The second thing that comes to mind is that I was very young at the time, but I think there are still many in the 70 to 80 year age bracket that can vividly remember, either through our parents talking about it or remembering it themselves, of the absolute horror of waking up one morning to find that we were controlled and that we had been taken over by Nazi Germany. That was a real horror in my lifetime. And later on that day, if that had happened, all our governing would come from Berlin. Now, if we wait another, as you say, 5 years, whatever it is, 6, 7, if in fact it ever comes, with whoever gets in at the next election, by that time, everybody of our generation, well, not everybody, but many of us, will have departed. So there will be no people who actually remember, in reality, the horror of those moments.
And moving on to the question, please, sir.
Yes.
Please.
Further on, while this is happening, we have a new generation of young people being brought up, who will be brought up to believe that there is no alternative than to be in the EU.
Right, well, I'm going to be more optimistic. Right, first point, referendum. I quite agree with you to be told by Mr Cameron, who's broken a promise once on this before, that maybe in 5 years' time he'll give us a vote, ain't good enough. We need a referendum on this issue, and we need it before the next general election. And if we make big breakthroughs on May the 2nd, and if we do win the European elections next year, do you know what? We might just be able to get a referendum on this before the next general election. What I've learned is the only thing politicians are scared of is losing their seats. It concentrates the mind wonderfully. So I'm with you, referendum PDQ. Incidentally, it must be a fair question. It must be a fair question that is put to the British people, and I've got a proposal. Would you like to live in an independent, free, prosperous country or in penal servitude? How's that? That works, doesn't it? That works. That works. No, I haven't finished yet. Yeah, I mean, as you say, older people, if I may call you that, older people remember some very dark days that this country went through, and a huge level of sacrifice that was made by more than one generation so that we, but also the other countries of Europe, could be free, independent democracies, and it's all of that that has been thrown away by career politicians as if it doesn't matter. It does matter. It matters that we should honour the memory of those who made those sacrifices, but it matters even more that we should hand down those hard-won and defended freedoms to successive generations, and that above all is why we must get control of our country back.
Gentleman on the end here.
Right. Nigel, 2 quickies here. Would you say that you get better coverage on the Russian TV channel than you do with the BBC? And if nobody knows about Russian TV, it's on channel 83 on Freeview.
Do you work for them?
No comment. Now, the second one is, I have heard that the EU now, if anybody wants to trade with Britain, wants to come to Britain and say, right, I've got some manufacturing, we want to trade with you. Is it true that the EU, we have to go through the EU now, and the EU will tell them which country they will trade with?
Fine. Russia Today, BBC, Russia Today, yeah, I can ring up Russia Today and say, I want to say this on this subject. They say, great, come in, we do it, we cut it and clip it, we bung it out on YouTube, it works a treat. So I'm very happy with that. I will say this, this is the second BBC question that's been asked tonight. The BBC have been blooming awful, but the BBC have got significantly better of late. Significantly better of late. And their coverage of us in the Eastleigh by-election from day one was absolutely scrupulously fair. So, you know, credit where it's due. The BBC are recognising that they've got things very badly wrong in a lot of areas, and whilst we'll never change the mindset of all of them, it's getting better. Although last week on Newsnight, did anybody see me on Newsnight last week? It was horrendous.
Yes.
It was very cold, as it is at the moment. I was in Brandon in Suffolk, and they got me in position in the Market Square at 10:35 to say I'll be on at 10:40, and time went on, and time went on, and I started to regret wearing leather-soled shoes because the feet were going numb, and 11:05 they had me on. Half an hour I stood there, and the line of questioning from Emily Mateless, and I finished up saying, I'm sorry, but this line of inquiry is truly ridiculous. So we won't change everybody at the BBC, but generally their coverage of us is getting quite a lot better. And your second question, trade, right, okay. You see, I'm getting tired now, I forgot the second part of the question. We are members, not of a common market free trade club, we are members of a customs union. It is an entirely outdated 19th century concept. Some, if they wanted to allude to the Germans, would call it a Zollverein. I have to be very careful what I say about the Germans myself. No, I do. The reason is that I'm married to a girl from Hamburg, so I'm married to a German, so no one needs to tell me about the dangers of living in a German-dominated household. The point about this old Zollverein customs union concept is you aren't only bound legally by the rules within the club, you're also bound without the club. And we, as the world's 6th largest economy and trading nation, are forbidden from making our own trade deals with other parts of the world. So little Switzerland has more trade arrangements with the biggest 30 non-EU countries in the world than we do as members of this union. It is an absolutely farcical, ridiculous idea. You know, maybe in the 1950s, the idea of getting France and Germany together around the table to talk to each other and trade with each other after the horrors that those wars had inflicted on the world was a good idea. Maybe they should have had maybe the Nobel Peace Prize should have been given to the EU in 1959. But now, actually what it's doing is driving the people of Europe apart, as we see a split now from north to south in Europe, and everyone starting to really dislike each other, and the economics of it in a 21st century global economy shows this thing is completely out of date as a concept. There's no point in thinking we can reform it or make it better. It's past its sell-by date. It's time the whole thing was closed down for our benefit and the benefit of hundreds of millions of people across the rest of Europe too.
John.
Oh, last question. Will you please just tell us, where did you get those mustard-coloured trousers?
Well, I've never been known for being much of an introvert. I guess that's part of it. And the BBC girl who interviewed me this lunchtime on the West Midlands news, she said, well, you know, aren't you a bit eccentric wearing trousers like that? You know, will people vote for a party whose leader wears yellow trousers? I said, well, I tell you what, they've got the choice. They can vote for me, whether they like me or hate me. At least what they see is what they get. With the rest, you've got a whole bunch of cardboard cutouts, non-human beings who've got no experience of life in the real world, no hinterland, which Dennis Healey said all politicians needed, no passion, no visions, no belief. They're a bunch of career politicians, and they're doing a pretty rotten job. So I'll stick with the yellow trousers, if that's all right. leave Fred to finish, but I missed the first part of this meeting, I'm sorry. Could I just ask a question? I don't know whether you've done this already or not, but just for my